In one corner, we have the Canon C80, sleek, sexy, affordable, with a brand new sensor and a big ass chip on its shoulder after Sony's been stealing all of Canon's camera thunder. In the other corner, we have the Fx6, Sony's 4-year-old cinecam, everyone's favorite, everyone's go-to, all faithful, but practically geriatric in camera years. And yet still, probably the C80's biggest competition, and the most evenly matched in the world of sub $7,000 docu-style cinecams. I've been doing extensive testing with both cameras side by side, image, I/O, usability, and functionality to determine which is the best. I even filmed a micro short with the C80 to see how it stacks up in a more cinematic style project. I figured out what you need to consider before purchasing the C80 or the Fx6, and even a couple of less talked about issues with both cameras that you should know about. So is the C80 the new Canon camera king? Let's find out. First, let's talk about the major improvements or upgrades the C80 has over the C70, a camera that I myself used to own. And the most important upgrade is the new full-frame sensor. That's right, this is not a Super 35 camera anymore, and that is a big deal. Canon have also swapped their 4K DGO sensor in the C70 for a new 6K triple base ISO back illuminated sensor. And if you don't think that's a big deal, then you can kiss my back illuminated sensor, because essentially what this triple base ISO sensor really means is that the C80 is pretty much as good as the Sony cameras in low light. Canon have caught up, baby. This is also a 6K sensor instead of the C70's 4K sensor, so you're getting a crispier, cleaner, downsampled image, which could be better depending on your perspective, and we'll talk about that later. The second major update is a 12G SDI port on its side, so if you're one of those HDMI haters, you now have a professional option for running a camera feed out of your camera. They've also put another quarter 20 thread on the bottom, so you can rig different tripod mounting plates to it without running into swivel problems that the C70's exceptionally stupid screw-based system had. It's got a new Ethernet port for streaming. The autofocus has allegedly been improved. Their flippy screen is brighter and more sturdy, and well, in terms of new features, that's about it. The rest of the camera is pretty similar to the C70, but those new features are a hell of an upgrade, and if truth be told, not only are these features that users ask for, these features are also the type of thing the Fx6 also has. Canon are playing catch up, but did they catch up or overtake the Fx6? First, the C80 full frame is the best thing about it. I love full frame. I will call one of my future children full frame. That will be his or her first name. He or she will be ridiculed at school and bullied mercilessly for that name, and I don't even care. That's how much I love the full frame look. It also has a new 6K sensor, which is definitely sharper than the Fx6's 4K sensor. Because it's 6K, you can also shoot in crop mode, which is like having a Super 35mm camera along with your full frame camera. You've got a C70 built into the C80. This option is so helpful for expanding your lens sizes without swapping lenses, or quickly shooting tighter or wider as you require without losing too much quality. The Fx6 can't do this, although it has clear image zoom, which is also very useful, but does result in an immediate, more obvious reduction in quality. Then you have this triple base ISO. Now, testing this at the highest base ISO of 128,000 compared to the Fx6, you can see that maybe the Fx6 is just a hair brighter in the shadows, but it is barely noticeable. I mean, this test with an aperture spotlight 60D at 10% and a tiny sensor light coming from the house as my light sources, look how bright it is. For reference, here are both cameras at their native 800 ISO with the same lighting setup. The C80 really is a low light beast, just like the Sony's FX6, and this really is a huge level up because you suddenly have so much more flexibility for low light scenarios. However, because the C80 has 3 base ISOs, I would go as far as to say that this is better than the FX6 setup, because a lot of the time 128,000 is actually way too bright, but 32,000, the second base ISO of the C80, would be perfect. Whereas the FX6 at 32,000 is noisy as hell. It's that one or the other of the FX6 where you desperately want something in the middle. Well, the C80 has that advantage. Canon. Then there's the raw recording capability of the C80, which can record 6K up to 30 frames per second in Canon RAW Lite and 60 frames per second in a cropped 4K mode. The FX6 can't do internal RAW. Yes, you can record ProRes RAW to an external monitor, but that's an extra step. It's an extra step in post, and it's an extra cost. The C80 in RAW is true 6K as well. The FX6 outputting RAW is 4K. Canon's RAW Lite is compatible with every editing suite, whereas ProRes RAW is not natively compatible with the best grading/editing system on the market, DaVinci Resolve. Advantage Canon. The new slightly brighter flip-out LCD monitor on the C80 is also definitely better as a quick monitoring system than the FX6's washed out, dimmer monitor as well. And let's talk about audio. Do you like having a 3.5mm audio jack? Well, not if you're an FX6 shooter. You don't, because in a bout of pure insanity, they chose not to include one at all on the FX6 body or the top handle. Also, if you remove the top handle off the FX6, you essentially remove the audio of the FX6 altogether. Not cool, Sony. Not cool. Canon's audio is 2 mini XLR ports built into the body of the C80, so there's no problems there. However, the full-size XLRs on the FX6 are definitely preferred for convenience. Canon has far more shooting options than the FX6. You can film long op, all eye, both in 10-bit color, whereas the FX6 lower quality option is only 8-bit, making it rather useless for anything but the most stripped down shoots where image really isn't important. Then there's Canon's RAW Lite, which is 12-bit with the ability to drastically change your image in the color grade with a far higher degree of latitude than any of the internal Sony FX6 options. Canon wins again. You can also film in C-Log 2 or C-Log 3 for quicker turnaround projects, while the FX6 only offers one log profile of S-Log 3. You can surely get a great image from either of these cameras, and you can adjust these images in the grade if you don't like the way they're interpreting colors out of the box. And this is a subjective opinion, but I would say that the C80 does have a nicer image if you're just going to quickly convert into Rec 709. And I would also say if you do heavy grading, C-Log 2 does offer a bit more latitude in the grade over Sony's S-Log 3. Feel free to disagree angrily in the comments, but if we're talking about image alone, just which one feels a little more premium, a little more color accurate, and a little crispier, then I think the C80 wins here. Check out this micro short I made filming in Canon RAW Lite to see what kind of look you can get out of the camera's best quality settings. So with all these advantages, the C80 is the better camera, right? I mean, the C80 is the better camera overall, right? Not so fast, Padme. While if we're just talking about image quality and shooting options, the C80 might be better. But a camera has several other factors that we must include collectively to judge it as a complete shooting experience that we haven't talked about. In fact, no one really talks about this problem when looking at the C70 and C80, but it's time to have a frank and open conversation about the shape of this camera. This form factor, this hybrid between DSLR and Cinecam, doesn't it look familiar to you? The mini XLR and HDMI ports on the side, the overly tall but a little bit too skinny shape, doesn't it remind you of something? Yeah, this form factor is dangerously close to Blackmagic's Pocket line of cameras, that awkward, annoying shape that makes it hard to rig, hard to balance, hard to build out, and not very practical to film on. We've been giving Blackmagic shit for this type of design for over 5 years, but Canon comes along and does it once, and they're geniuses. They're innovating. They're giving us something different. Let's make one thing clear. Some hybrids shouldn't exist, and mixing a DSLR body with a cinema camera body is not a stroke of genius. It's fucking stupid. There's a reason these two things are kept separate, because when you do mix them, you end up with something like this.
Sloth, you're gonna live with me now. Yeah, I'm gonna take care of you. Because I love you.
The C70 design is not good. It wasn't good on the Blackmagic Pocket cameras, it's not good when Canon adopted it, and it hasn't gotten better with the C80. I mean, look how high this setup gets when you try and put a top handle on the camera. That's without 15mm rods, by the way. I mean, it's just a really awkward shape. It doesn't feel very good to hold for long periods of time. And as soon as you add things to it, it actually gets worse. I mean, half the reason I sold my C70 was because by the time you add a cage, a monitor, and some audio attachments, this thing is really heavy and like really out of balance. It's just a dumb design. Yeah, I said it. I mean, why can't anyone just admit this? If we hated it in the Blackmagic until the Pixels came along, how come we aren't hating on the C80? Well, I am. Because let's be very clear, while the FX6 body design has its drawbacks, it is a much better design, a much more comfortable, functional, practical design than the C80. That's not up for debate, and Canon know this. That's why they're releasing the C400 at the same time. It's almost like they're saying, hey, you getting sick of battling this weird-ass wonky C80 form factor? Just upgrade to the C400 and feel like you're holding a real cinema camera again. Cinema cameras should be built like cinema cameras so they can be used like cinema cameras. That's what all of these functions are for. They should not be built like they're going to fall over as soon as you put a lens on them. Also, because the C80 has this weird shape, they're really struggling to fit all the cinema controls onto it. The memory cards go in the front of the camera with the timecode. The SDI port comes out the top, while the HDMI is at the bottom. The XLR controls are hidden behind the LCD screen because there's nowhere else to fit them. Whereas in a more logical layout, pretty much everything on the FX6 is situated at its back. And with the FX6's adjustable side handle, it's just so much nicer to hold. And so is the FX6's top handle. I mean, look at the C80 top handle. How does this make sense? What do we traditionally put on a top handle? A monitor. What does adding a monitor do to this top handle? Furthermore, look at where the mic mount is placed. It's placed so there is no way to have it attached with a monitor also attached to the top handle. I mean, what sort of dumb fuckery was involved in this line of thinking? They're all gonna just look at that tiny LCD screen for 12 hours a day? We actually had to place the mic mount upside down when we rigged the C80 for us on our short for it to be able to attach both a monitor and a mic to this top handle at the same time. But it then meant we couldn't fit on a matte box. It's all just sort of poorly thought out. And if you don't use the proprietary top handle, you only have this one single screw on the top of the C80, which makes it very difficult to put any third-party top handles on this thing. None of it really makes sense for practical shooting, whether you're thinking about handheld or a bigger cine rig. This shape just wants to reject any accessory, whereas you can absolutely build out the FX6 in a more straightforward, practical way. The menu systems on both cameras are okay. Certainly better than they used to be. I think Sony's new quick menu system is quicker to work through and navigate, while Canon's drop-down menus feel very convoluted. Both companies need to take a page from Red and Black Magic here. And I don't think we can talk about the C80 without at least mentioning the Canon Cripple Hammer.
It's not possible.
Now, it may be true that Canon, thanks to competition from Sony, have been forced to cripple their cameras in a much less dramatic way than they once used to, but some of those bad habits still remain. And the main difference between the C80 and the C400 is the additional frame rates of the C400, because it uses CF Express Type B memory cards, which are, in 2024, absolutely an industry standard. The C80 uses SD cards, absolutely an industry standard, back in 2019. And I think the main reason that they kept using these SD cards is so they could limit the frame rates on the C80 and save them for the C400. I mean, why else use an out-of-date card system that almost every other brand has upgraded from in their Cineline cameras? I mean, the FX6 uses CF Express Type A cards, and that camera came out in 2020. Do you see what's going on here? But actually, the most crippling thing about Canon these days is their lack of support for third-party RF lenses, or their closed-door policy when it relates to third-party manufacturers who want to make cheap, or dare I say just affordable RF glass for Canon cameras. Now, Canon say they allow third parties to present them with lens designs for their approval, but it's the old cloak and dagger bullshit where the whole point is to severely limit the third-party options available and make you buy Canon RF lenses. There's just one problem with that. The quality RF lenses that Canon create are insanely expensive. I mean, we're talking half the price or more of the C80 camera body. So if you buy into a C80 and you want to use autofocus, you're not just having to buy the camera, you have to buy the lens. And not just any lens. If you want autofocus that's nearly as good as a Sony camera, then you need the most expensive RF lenses. And suddenly a couple of those and you've doubled the cost of your C80 in a flash. It all feels very icky when you look at Sony, who allow all sorts of crazy third-party lenses, many of which are extremely high quality and yet also extremely affordable, such as the Tamron Zoom set that I own. Similar first-party lenses on Canon are over double the price, and in fact, there are just way less lens options for the C80 than there are for the FX6 with their E-mount glass, because of the way that Canon like to restrict manufacturers from making lenses for them. It might help them sell more of their own lenses, but it severely hurts them from coaxing people back to their cameras like me, the same people who probably left over their earlier, more severe cripple tactics and high prices. So while the Canon C80 has what I believe is a nicer image and a lot more shooting modes, and despite being over 4 years newer than the FX6, given all these factors, I probably wouldn't buy one, and as a self-proclaimed Sony image hater, I absolutely hate myself for saying this, but I would still probably choose an FX6 over a C80. While the C80 might be $500 cheaper, getting a good set of lenses to go with the camera is going to be way more than the money you might save on the body. And while I do prefer Canon color science and the 6K shooting options, at the end of the day, I need a camera that is going to be functional and practical when I hold it in my hands, and that I can build out in a sensible way should I need to for bigger jobs. And after filming with it, I know that the C80 just can't do that because of that cringe hybrid style shape. The C80 is a great camera. It has some really excellent upgrades over the C70 that mean if I was still a C70 shooter, I'd have no hesitation in recommending it. And look, if you're deep in the Canon cult already, then the C80 might be your new cult leader. But for those of us who left Canon a few years back, that's why I'm picking the FX6 as my choice. As always, I am the Savage Filmmaker, and I'll see you when I see you.